sponsored by Local Touch Online, a free online magazine that has an exclusive article by Pop Culture Geekery every month. This episode is sponsored by Hill Country Comic-Con. Hill Country Comic-Con is here to promote fun, art, literacy, and imagination through pop culture and comics. It will be held April 4th and 5th at the New Braunfels Convention Center. Go to hillcountrycomiccon.com to get your tickets today. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pop Culture Geekery. I'm Joe Solis, and I'm joined by two of my co-hosts who you've seen in past episodes. Here to my immediate left, I have Roy from Roy's Toy Box, and here to my right, I have Philip from Good Times NB. So it's almost like, our own little in-game. We're bringing everybody together. We just need Sarah and Trina, and that's when, this is an Infinity War. That'll happen in the next one. Yeah.
Our powers combined, we will, clean a room or something.
But so we wanted to get this out to you guys because the digital version of the animated movie Superman Red Sun just came out. So it's about a month early from the actual Blu-ray and DVD release. And so normally this is the way that they release them. And of course you got to pay the full $20 to view it. And I was like, this one, I just took a chance and did it. And so hopefully we can get this out early. And I can safely say we're all pretty happy that we did, right?
It was worth it. Yeah, definitely worth the 20 on that one. That was really good.
It's because it wasn't Roy's 20, that's why.
I was going to say it's the best $20 I didn't have to spend in a long time, so much obliged.
But it's mine forever now.
Good job, Bill.
But anyway, so... if you haven't followed or if you have no idea, the DC animated movies are some of the best animated movies out there, comic and just in general. And they've gotten so much better over the years. I mean, it's probably, I want to say that very first one, the first time that they had the Death of Superman, yeah. I think it was like 2003 or something. Yeah. I don't remember that.
Yeah,
Do you remember?
Those were a little rough, but
yeah.
As of late, I mean, they really have just... Man, they brought up their game so much. And it's just like they took everything that worked in all the other ones and they just put it in this one. And it's stellar. It's really good.
And I think there's kind of a continuity with them, right? Because starting with, was it Justice League War, which was based on the New 52 right. reboot? Like after that, most of them kind of happen.
Yeah.
Like sequentially.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I kind of see where the style just... I don't know. They just stepped up their game. That's where I notice it. That and Arkham Asylum, all those were just above the others by far.
Yeah. So we'll do a section here at the beginning with no spoilers, and then we'll clearly let you know when we're switching to spoilers, because there's so many cool fan service moments in here that we don't want to spoil for you. But yeah. So yeah, I'll just, I guess, who wants to start? I don't know what to, here you go, Philip. I know you had some notes and stuff. So
I may have been taking notes as we were watching. Well, I have an interesting perspective because I haven't seen a lot of these DC animated things yet. And I'm not traditionally the biggest Superman fan, but I am so glad I came and watched it. It was real, like even if you're not into Superman, like you'll be into this Superman because it's so different. Mm-hmm. It's a really good twist on the things that I find boring about Superman, which is how he's too innocent and too trusting and too invincible. And he's not really any of those things in this movie, but he has that heart. Like it's just that his ideals are twisted early, which is the whole premise, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really, really enjoyable. I thought the animation was fantastic. I know, Joe, or Roy, I'm so sorry. Blooper alert. Roy probably has more to say on that, but I enjoyed the art style a lot, the animation, and the story was a lot of fun.
Real quick, I forgot to mention, if you didn't know, this is based on a graphic novel, or well, as a miniseries before that. But I read it in graphic novel form, but it's probably been about 10 years ago. So I probably should have reread it just to see what the differences were. I feel like, again, we're not going to spoil anything, but I feel like the ending's definitely different. But I just remember it was a really good story. And so had you ever read it at all?
No, I know of it. I know all the designs. I saw the, the different things that they introduce in this. But even not reading it, this is kind of one of those instances where I kind of feel like maybe this might actually be better than the book, but which is seldom the case. So I'm really curious now. I have to read the book and just see what really happened. But this alone with itself was it was good. It's a great story. So looking forward to see what they do differently in the book.
Yeah, so I don't really I watched the trailer, but I don't remember exactly which characters they showed, other than Batman. That one we can talk about. But there's definitely a lot more that come out, so keep your eyes open. But yeah, so basically the premise is he lands in Russia instead of America. Instead of being found by the Kents, he's found by the Russian government, and raised with the ideals of the time, which Stalin is actually alive, so he's kind of like the father figure. So that was a pretty interesting setup, and I think Philip talked about it to where he was brainwashed early, basically.
Yeah. He always maintained that he honestly believed that what he was doing was the right thing, like for the greatest good. And yeah, we'll get into it in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a case of the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions,
Absolutely.
So, which I know you've seen Breaking Bad, right?
Yes.
Have you?
No, but I'm familiar with the basic idea, at least. Yeah.
Because it's the same idea. It's like the main character thinks he's doing the right thing, and is just trying his best to convince everybody around him that he's doing the right thing. And because Superman's invincible, it's like you have to listen to him pretty much out of fear. So what do you got to add to that?
No, I mean that's true, and that's kind of and they even address it, without spoiling anything. They address that, and they actually just straight up say that. So that's pretty interesting that they're just like, that we're just going to put it out there. That's exactly why he is and who he is, and why people follow him in this alternate universe. Is this an alternate universe type thing? Okay,
It's sort of like a what if type book, I think is what they were called, like the what if books.
Okay.
Or the Elseworld stories.
Right.
So, with that, obviously those stories, there's so many good ones to mine from because there's no limits and you can do whatever. And they definitely do that with this. I don't know if it had a rating, but it was definitely either a hard PG-13 or a light R. So
yeah, with all the smoking references in this one, I was like, okay, this is definitely a PG-13 on that alone. I was really surprised by that. I'm not saying I'm against smoking, but I was really surprised that there was so much in it. I don't know.
I don't think it's necessarily a story spoiler, but early on, you see Lois Lane light up a cigarette and then make a joke about how it's the same brand my doctor smokes, so it's fine, which is just very in the time. There's a lot of stuff like that very firmly cements it in the decades that the story takes place in, which is another thing that was really cool to see how they sort of play on all of that history.
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, because there's definitely a lot of alternate history, and like you said, the whole thing that smoking used to be more of a culturally acceptable thing. It was almost like a thing of high society, or that you had made it, or that you were successful. So they definitely played that up. And yeah, because I think the story takes place from about 46 all the way into the 80s.
Yeah. Last one I saw was 83, but I'm curious how much further it went from there. But that's the last date I saw, I think.
Yeah, I think that's about where it.
I think that's where
it stopped.
I think that's where it kind of ends. Yeah.
But yeah, it's so hard to talk about because there's just so much stuff to spoil, because they really do, they really do integrate a lot of classic DC ideas, and kind of to Philip's point, even if you haven't followed the DC movies, or hopefully if you have a general knowledge of DC and the characters, I think you're going to recognize the majority of them. So
yeah, that was my experience. I'm not as well read on all of the source material and stuff, but definitely the big references they made me very happy.
Yeah, and like to that point, if you don't watch them, I mean, they kind of spoon fed you who these people are and what they're about and all these moments. Yeah. So they were pretty heavy on it. They laid it heavy, but I mean, theatrical, it's good.
Yeah.
I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's like, okay, so it helps the general audience. So I'm glad that you could enjoy it without still seeing all the others, and they made it pretty easy. So yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, it is a standalone, though. It's an alternate universe. So even if you hadn't watched the other DC movies, you wouldn't be lost, because they fill you in on everything. So I don't know. I guess we can go and just give our ratings, and we'll just got to move on to spoilers because there's just it's too hard to talk about with this one. So if you remember, our scale is 1 to 10. 5 with us is an average movie. It's not as harsh a hit as some other websites. So do one of you want to go first? You want me to give my rating first? Or?
Go ahead. You got
okay. I got the mic. I was thinking about it. I actually was lost in it, so I wasn't really thinking about a rating. But usually when I feel like it's just solid and like I enjoyed it and nothing really elevated it for me like too high, I usually just settle on 8 out of 10 because I just feel like it's just solid. I don't really have any complaints. There was just maybe some parts that I wanted to feel more than I didn't. But that's kind of the way I feel about these animated projects. Maybe it's just because they're animated versus live action, but that's probably not true because we all remember at least me and Roy remember the death of Optimus Prime. Yeah. So, yeah, I know, right? So, who's next?
What was your rating, though?
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10? Mm-hmm. You want to take it, Philip, or me?
Sure. I mean, I would probably agree. I'd probably give it a solid 8 as well. Just enjoyable. The action was good and exciting. The fight scene, like, I don't know, sometimes with animated stuff, the fight scenes are too, I don't know, hard to follow, or I'm not sure how to describe it, but it was really, the action scenes were great. The story was great. Art was great. So yeah, solid 8 out of 10 for sure.
Maybe not as innovative or interesting. Maybe sometimes they kind of get lazy.
Yeah, there were some times, I think, because of animation that I feel like they lost some opportunities. They could have been more expressive with some of the animation stuff, not to really get into the spoilery moments, but I feel like there were some wasted opportunities when it came to the emotional range of the characters per se, but still pretty good. It still hits home.
I'm actually going to go with one higher, a 9 out of 10, just for me as an artist just watching this. The level that they've taken these two, the story and everything is fine, but just the animation alone, art direction, the storyboard, the way they played it out, directing, everything was, for me, it elevated it just a little higher than probably some of the other ones. But I rate the other ones higher anyways, especially as of late. But just really enjoyed it. I didn't see Joe pick up his phone to look at it, which is a good indication. And I did see Philip lift but he was actually taking notes, so that was really good. And I think it speaks well of this movie, of this animated movie. It's entertaining. It's the fight, like you said, the fights are amazing. That you can see they spent a lot of time on the choreography on that. I thought, and they carried it through really well. Just the homages to a lot of the stuff that we'll talk about in the spoilers really kind of hit, like, for me, I was like, oh man, that's really good, or oh, I can't believe they're doing this kind of thing, which it generated a response. So to me, that was a good thing. I was completely involved in it. Wasn't bored at least once. Just enjoyed it. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for me.
All right. So before we move on, just want to say thank you to those of you who have subscribed so far. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe because we have a lot more things coming this year. Between all three of us, Philip and his wife Trina have their show Good Times NB, which I'll put their link below. So if you haven't subscribed to them, they'll show you a lot of cool stuff in the surrounding area of New Braunfels and beyond. And then, Roy does have his Instagram if you want to follow his toy photography. And then, of course, he does come on our show and do toy reviews. Mm-hmm. And I know we're going to have a few this year, especially linked with some really good movies coming out. So nice. But yeah, so just, if you like the video, hit like, leave a comment below if you've seen this movie, or if, haven't seen it yet, have a question, just keep the spoilers away. But other than that, we're going to move on to spoilers. All right, so we are back. So if you're still with us, that means you either have already seen the movie or you want to hear the spoilers. And trust me, there is a lot of them. So we'll start with the earliest one, or, the one that made Roy cringe a couple of times, which was Lois Lane in this world is married to Lex Luthor, which you just loved that, didn't you?
That was just one of the most jarring things for me. It's just so twisted and wrong. And in the movie, throughout all the stuff that Lex does, I still see them as this bad guy with the voice. I mean, Diedrich Bader, who actually played Batman in was it Bold, Batman Brave and the Bold, and he's actually in the Harley Quinn as Batman. It's interesting to see him take this dynamic with Luthor, but it worked really well. And he just oozed that confidence, but also I was like, no, this guy's got something up his sleeve. He was always bad, but you know, since it's a spoilers, I don't really think he did anything bad. He was doing stuff positive for the world, and still it's kind of weird that it was still his same, the goal was still the same, is to get rid of Superman, which, you know, we all know from our world of comics and movies that's what his ultimate goal was anyways. But in this, it's weird that they were able to take that and make him a good guy and still carry out his goal. And you're like, I don't want to root for Lex Luthor. And then seeing him and Lois, oh, that was terrible. And the homage, that one, the classic Superman where he's, you know, reaching out. I think it's like the Action Comics #1 or something like that. Seeing him do that and with the Russian stuff, and I was like, ouch. But yeah, I mean, but anything, it generated some kind of emotion or reaction from me, so that's good. I put it in the plus column. So, but yeah, that Lois Lex thing is.
Well, and then I think that kind of, you know, puts the thread through this whole story of, you know, it's these characters that we know, but they're in a totally different situation, you know, and so your mind obviously keeps going back to, oh yeah, that's Lex Luthor. He's supposed to be bad. Like, what's wrong with this world? It's messed up, you know. Yeah. What about you, Philip?
I would say he is still kind of bad, because I think ultimately his ultimate goal is just to get rid of Superman, not even necessarily. I mean, again, this is spoiler section, so by the end of the movie, Lex Luthor is the president of the United States of America, but his methods at trying to take Superman out are pretty messed up.
Yeah. Well, and like in the comics, sorry not to jump in, but in the comics, when we have seen Luthor as president, and it really does mimic our current situation right now in a lot of ways. So it was weird to still see them take that juxtaposition and make him a good guy, even though it was, again, it was that story retold, but they just turned it around. And, you know, and because of Superman's brainwashing, I don't know, it worked. It's still, I mean, you had to root for him, even though I still didn't. Yeah. But, you know, just.
Well, it's like the first thing that came up, which was him creating, or Lex Luthor creating Superior Man, which is basically just the clone. Like, we're joking, we're like, oh my God, it's Nuclear Man from Superman 4, you know? But of course that goes south real quick. Yeah. Right. You want to go with that?
That was probably my favorite sequence in the whole thing, was the fight between Superior Man and Superman, which then turns into basically a fight between Bizarro and Superman. But you get to see, in Superior Man, you get to see what Superman off the rails really looked like, just in full on aggressive mode. And then when he kind of starts going Bizarro, then our, you know, Russian Superman returns in full force. So it's just a really strong fight. It was really well done and exciting. It doesn't end well for Mr. Bizarro, which is what starts driving a wedge between, you know, Lois and Lex, but not ultimately enough to. Yeah. It's interesting how she stays as loyal to him in this story as she stays to Superman in the old stories. Yeah. So.
You got something out of that?
Oh no, it was one of those moments where I kind of felt like, I mean, they only had the character on screen for such a short time, but you felt, I mean, a little bit, you felt bad for the guy, because his purpose, he was born to die, basically. Yes. And Lex Luthor says as much. He has like, what, 12% chance of actually, and also it was just kind of I couldn't help but feel a little bit, I don't know, like if I was Russian, I'd be like, yeah, I'd be cheering, because it felt almost like a propaganda piece. Even though it's not, it really carried that, for me, that kind of message, like, you know, here, they could have pretty much just filmed that and shown it to all the Russian people and said, hey, this is what America is, or whatever. So it was interesting. I didn't want to see him lose, but you felt for the guy in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do talk about that a lot, you know, about the propaganda. You know, Superman is all about staying away from that, even though he's in the middle of it, you know. Because let's see, shortly after that, he finds out that Stalin has been keeping people like as slaves, basically. Yeah,
still the and then there's still the mass killings and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still the Soviet Union as we know it, up until the point where, spoiler, Superman finds out about the gulags, because Stalin's been lying to him, right, and just showing him just the idealized version of communism, So he totally believes in it, and then he finds out about the gulags and murders Stalin and starts taking over himself, and things go pretty well at first, and then the harsh realities of trying to control massive groups of people start setting in, which I think is one of the points that the movie ultimately makes, is that you can't. You have to let people come to their own decisions, whether you agree with them or not. But I felt that stuff was really current, even for it being set in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then having been originally written in, what did we figure out, 2003, it's still very current to what's going on today.
Yeah, which is, I think, why it was a perfect time to do this one. It mirrors society, kind of where we're at. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and so with that one, we did get introduced to a young Bruce Wayne, or well, no, I'm sorry, not Bruce Wayne. He's just Batman later. What I don't remember what is.
Wayne.
Yeah, I don't remember what.
Yeah, real quick, I think.
But you know, they set that up. And I guess that's when I realized that they were going to go through the decades, because he was a boy when that happened, as he always is. You know, the worst things happen to him when he's young.
And his parents died, it looks like. So we got that taken care of. You know, and Superman was responsible.
They kind of die in an alley. So
yeah, interesting take on that.
So let's see what comes next. After the defeat of Stalin, then Brainiac shows up, right? Yeah, and there's an interesting juxtaposition of the classic bottled city of Kandor. Anyone of y'all want to go over that one?
I don't know a lot.
Yeah, he doesn't.
Well, yeah. I mean, Brainiac comes down, and he basically, you know, like he has done in the past, instead of Kandor, he takes Stalingrad. Yeah, and he takes it up, and it becomes the bottled city of Stalingrad. Yeah. And you know, Superman. He's still called Superman, I assume. So he goes in there, and he basically just lays a smackdown on him, actually penetrates his defenses and takes over Brainiac and makes him a slave to the state, you know, and he becomes a servant of Superman, of Russia. So,
which I guess the irony for that is that Brainiac, I don't even know, he's all about control, you know, and so he in turn is getting controlled by one of our powers on Earth, you know, or our systems on Earth, basically. Let's see what comes after that. Is that when we skip ahead? I think we get introduced to the idea that the Green Lantern Corps exists in this world, right?
They tease it real quick. They find a Lantern Corps ship and get the ring. Lex just there's a funny moment where they're all looking at this alien body with the ring, and the scientists are like, "Yeah, we think it's a power source." And he's like, "Why haven't you removed it yet?" "Well, we're waiting on an authorization." And while they're talking, he grabs a snipper and just clips the finger off and picks up the ring. It's like, "Here, problem solved."
Which is really cool, because then they introduced Hal Jordan, which was a nice little, like, oh, it's awesome. When he walked in, at first I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then as soon as they showed that, and I see the soldier standing next to Kennedy, who actually looks like he survived longer, wasn't assassinated. They shot, and I was like, oh, that's Hal Jordan. I was like, this is going to be awesome. They took a different direction on it. It almost, I guess, I assume that Oa doesn't exist, or at least not the way it does in the world we know. So it was an interesting way they weaponized, which I really love. We'll get to that, but yeah, that was a cool little introduction right there.
Did y'all notice that the ship with the Green Lantern symbol kind of looked like a Flash Gordon style ship?
Yes, it was incredibly retro. I noticed that too. That was a nice nod to just the really old style that they would have had.
When I saw that, I was like, "Hey, it's the ship from Futurama."
And they say too that it's been buried for hundreds of years. Like they joke about how it's old, and so of course it has this really old design. That was kind of a clever little thing there.
And let's not forget that we do have Wonder Woman in this world, who, for all intents and purposes, is basically the same. There's no nothing dramatically different about her, except for one little aspect. But she prefers the females of Themyscira over anybody else.
Kind of funny. I thought it was funny the way they introduced it. But at the same time, I like how it lent to Superman's character. I mean, they didn't really get into all that, I don't know, love triangle stuff that sometimes happens. And, you know, even though he's not with Lois, you know, he's not with Wonder Woman either. And he even says in the movie, he's like, you know, he needs to focus on this, you know, that he's glad that it's not a distraction, basically. So, yeah. And to me, it kind of felt like, well, that kind of removes more of that humanity from him. So he still thinks he's doing good for humans. And I think even Lois addresses that, you know, what do you know about being human? You know, so it's kind of interesting to see that happen later on. He was just like, oh, thank God I don't have to worry about that. And it removes that humanity. Again, he had no desire for a mate. He just wanted friends. So that was interesting.
Well, maybe friends, but it's basically allies,
Right, yeah.
because that way, he never wanted to attack the U.S. He had Brainiac as a slave, telling him to attack the U.S., and he would never listen. He would enslave people who didn't agree with him by literally putting brain boxes on them. That started driving a wedge between him and Wonder Woman. So let's see, where are we at this? Oh, this is the point where we get to Batman, right?
Yeah, and then Anarchist Batman is basically the coolest thing I've seen all year. I know it's early in the year yet, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. That was really cool. Yeah, they're doing a little they have this propaganda piece that they think, the way they set it up, as the viewer, you think that. So, sorry, let me back up. Every time we advance through a decade, we get like a news broadcast that sort of gives us the state of the world. And so far, because of Superman's influence, the Soviet Union has been growing and prospering. And so we get to this scene where this woman is explaining to all of these people about how, with Superman's help, everyone in the Warsaw Pact countries is happy, our productivity is just on the rise, all this kind of stuff. And then you hear Batman's voice cut in and say, you're lying to all of these people. This is bogus propaganda. I'm about to blow this museum up in 10 minutes. And then it cuts outside and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say 10 minutes? I meant 10 seconds." And then just boom. And then he like surfs on an attack helicopter into another attack helicopter. So yeah, Batman's still the coolest thing around, even Russia.
Yeah, his design was sick. Yeah, I mean, I'd seen it in the yeah. That was really
comes
good.
Out further than the rest of his head. It's like busting out of the cowl. But he looks fantastic. Just the armor, they're not armor, but the suit, the gadgetry. It's just all the designs are just tweaked just enough to make them really fresh and interesting.
Yeah, well, he kind of reminded me of or at least the style, especially with him. It reminded me a lot of Ed McGuinness, even though the proportions weren't as wild. It looked like they just took him out of Ed McGuinness's world. Yeah, and that chin, chin. But it works so well, and I think they even kind of did that with Superman as the story progressed, like with the costume changes. By the end, that costume is sick that he's wearing. He's wearing the cuffed gloves and that collar. Yeah, and it's very that uniform. It has a uniform but costume look. But I think it almost looked like the style changed a little bit as it progressed in the decades. I don't know if that was intentional, if they had other artists on it. I mean, it was still enough of the original look, but it just had this kind of like a heightened stylization to it, really sharp. I noticed it got a little sharper as it went forward. So I don't know if that was intentional, but it really worked, because in the end, it just really lent to the story a lot more, to the dynamics of when they're fighting and all that stuff. Yeah.
And this is where I realized that we were going to progress through the story with different characters, because it's not like Superman versus Batman, or even The Dark Knight Returns, where it's him versus Batman. So that was kind of surprising, because we actually do get a resolution to that story in the middle. Anybody?
Yeah.
I'll go over it, because my heart was broken the most, I think. But
I think his heart was broken the most. But we'll get to it.
Big bada boom. But yeah, so basically, Batman does what Batman always does. So he prepped. Do you think Batman meal preps?
Yeah, definitely.
Because he preps everything else.
Yeah. Meals.
So he basically gets, he captures Wonder Woman. He gets Superman to come to a place to where he has all these red sun lamps set up, and of course, of course. Yeah. And so he, uses that to beat the crap out of Superman.
Really brutal. That's where the rating on this one goes up, because that fight, I mean, there's blood flying. Superman takes a shot to the chin, and it immediately, like, his chin bloods up, and it's there for the rest of the sequence. Like, it's brutal.
Mm-hmm. You got anything to add to that?
Well, no. What I was going to say, though, is I was kind of interested with, and maybe even wanted to see how Batman got to that point with the Wonder Woman, because when you walk into the scene, basically she's tied up by her own lasso, helpless and under Batman's control and command. Mm-hmm. And so, he tells Superman, if you try to harm me, she dies. She's ordered to kill herself, which I've never seen anything about the lore of the lasso doing that. So I don't, that was kind of new. It was interesting, but I kind of want to see how did that happen. So I'm hoping in the book it goes into detail about that. But it was an interesting part of the fight. It really leveled the playing field.
Yeah, and Wonder Woman was interesting because she tried to be on Superman's side, but then disagreed with some of the things he did. But then here, I don't know if just Batman aggravated her or what, but she ends up helping Superman get out of the situation, which basically screws over Batman. So he ends up killing himself by exploding his heart. So that we're like, oh, is the movie over? But it's like, but because after that, let's see, what do we fast forward to? The Green Lantern Corps come in next, I think.
Yeah. So once again, so Brainiac comes in as this huge, Brainiac machine, bottles up the city. Superman beats the poo out of him. The next time we see him, he sort of looks like the robot maid from the Jetsons. He's incredibly hobbled. Like he doesn't even have arms. He just has this little rolly track. And then as the movie progresses, he gets more and more of a body until he's fully upright, walking around normal, kind of scary looking again. And he keeps telling Superman, hey, we need to just go attack. That's the only way to end this. They're just going to keep escalating. The U.S. is just going to keep escalating this conflict. And as he's telling him this, the Green Lantern Corps shows up on radar to try and come, take Superman out basically in his homeland. And so he goes out and there's this huge fight over the ocean, which was,
And do we determine that he killed them, even though there was no blood? I mean, he probably. I assume, but their shields were still up, which to me says no, because generally when they die, their shields break or drop, their rings fly off. But because this is a different universe, it doesn't look like that happens in this. And I think Lex even said we're going to reverse engineer these things and weaponize them for us. So I was curious, but they did go down. I guess they died. I mean, I don't know if it really means anything, but
no, to your point, because really the only ring that would have gone off would have been Hal's, because everybody else was a Luthor design ring, so it wouldn't have had the same design as Oa. But yeah, so then let's see that when it gets to the final confrontation at the White House, the revelation with Brainiac.
That's what kind of pushes him. He's finally like, okay, you're right. They're just going to keep bigger, badder weapons. Let's do this, and brings up the big Brainiac ship and flies over to the front of the White House, and then the rug gets pulled out from under him by Brainiac, essentially.
It was almost anticlimactic. I don't know what I was expecting. I wanted to see this big, it's finally going down. And usually what happens that I've seen in any movie where they take the bad guy and make them a good guy, they actually almost power them down. They usually end up losing or dying really easily. And it didn't happen in this one, which is a surprise. And instead of this big battle, you get this revelation basically. And you're just like, oh, okay. But it worked. I think it worked. And then what happens next?
Well, I think it's also because we had a lot of good action throughout, so they weren't counting on that to be the payoff at the end, because the whole point is you're watching Superman struggle through this whole time, because he is struggling. It's funny, that was interesting to me that even in this world he's still Superman.
He is.
Like you see that at his core he's struggling with himself and these values that he's been taught. So that was probably the most interesting part, that I think was the most understated, but it was good that it was understated, because you should be paying attention. That's why I wasn't on my phone, and noticing that struggle with Superman. So yeah, at the end when they defeat Brainiac, and then Brainiac, of course, has the classic self-destruct. Superman decides to take it into space where it's going to blow up, and
randomly. All right.
Well, it's the 4 black holes that are powering. I'm like, how do you know this much about him and you couldn't shut him down? But and he does sort of like the Iron Man with the missile, flying it off into space, and then just big boom.
It was very what is it, Iron Giant? I mean, when I see, and he even like smiles, and I just felt, I was like, oh, that hurts still a little bit.
Yeah, but of course, like you or one of y'all said that Lex Luthor does. He's the president, and then it actually gets passed on to the James Olsen of this world. And then after that, we see Superman did survive. He's in the crowd as Russian Clark Kent, I guess.
The classic with the Dick Tracy coat and the glasses and the hat and everything. That was a really neat. That's one of those moments that's like a great nod to all the classic source stuff.
Yeah. They did do a lot of that. And we discussed the style of the movie overall. It kind of had a blend of, for me, and I think you recognize a little bit of the Max Fleischer stuff, just contemporary. It was really cool, and it really worked for this story. And I'm curious, I don't know if they did that in the book, but again, usually they adapt it, the art to the story, to the movie, but that really worked for this story. It just looks like an evolution of Max Fleischer. If it was still going on, that's what they would look like. Max Fleischer and kind of Bruce Timm, traditional,
So it was a lot of Bruce Timm. I got a lot of Bruce Timm vibes, especially off the Wonder Woman design. Like just the way even her face was done was very like Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and stuff like that, which I have watched a lot of that stuff. So
yeah, and I mean in the book they did have all the like classic propaganda stuff. I think they did a nod to one of the pictures with him grabbing the lever on the cog.
Russian iconic thing of him, like the industrial movement, whatever. Yeah. And that was really cool though. They did really well with that stuff though, I have to say.
Even when he first reveals, because his name's not Clark. So it's a little bit coy at the very beginning, although it doesn't take long to figure out what's going on and who he is. But like instead of lifting the Kent's car in the field, he picks up a tractor, in the field, which is also a very Soviet symbol, and the again in the Gulag when he catches the beam, that's very classic. At one point they have Superior Man actually do it, but he breaks the chains, which is another classic image. I even saw something they do one of the early propaganda pieces they do about the Russian Superman, or just Superman. They just call him Superman, but it's in black and white, and the style of it reminded me of something that I watched as a kid that I had almost forgotten about. That was these old black and white Superman cartoons that were shorts. They didn't have any dialogue; it was just sound effects and music. But it really took me back there for a minute. So that was really cool to see. I don't know if that was what they were going for, but it worked.
Anything else before we wrap up? Because that's pretty much the whole movie right there. I didn't even notice the time. I didn't feel like it was that long.
Yeah, which I think it lends to another reason of it being, for me, a higher mark. I enjoyed it all the way through. I wasn't thinking about something else. I was just focused on that. Other than watching Joe not get on his phone, I was like, wow, that was my like I said, it's my indication. I was like, if Joe's watching it, then it must be good.
That's the litmus test. If Joe isn't on his phone, it's gonna get a high ranking. But yeah, I'd agree. The pacing of it was not too fast, but it kept moving. It didn't ever feel boring. It didn't feel long. It's just good ride from start to finish.
Yeah. And the voice actors they got for this were pretty good too. Got to give them props. Obviously, Dietrich Bader as Luther was great. You had Tara Strong. She played a character in this one. I'm trying to. Oh, and then you mentioned
Jason
Isaac, who again was that again?
I think it was Superman.
Oh, the villain. Well, right, but he was the villain from The Patriot, I think.
He's been in a lot of stuff. That's where I always think of him.
But he did a good job. He kept the accent. Every now and then it would drop off. But for the most part, they stayed true to it. I was like, okay, they're going to ride this all the way out. I think we joked about how by the end of it was just like, oh, we're just going to speak English now. The voice cast again, great voice direction, casting for that really worked for the movie as well. So I think that's it for me.
All right. Well, I guess we can go and wrap this up. And in case, apparently the theme of this one was giving me, a hard time on my phone. If y'all want to know where my phone is, it's right there. Y'all are looking at us through my phone. So
are you guys in the phone? Are you okay in there? This is the kind of quality content you can expect when I'm on the scene.
So anyway, thanks again for watching. Again, look in the description below for the links to everything to subscribe and like and all that good stuff. So anyway, we'll catch you guys next time.